What's up, IDP Army? It's your man, Jordan Rains at 50 Shades of Drunk. This is the IDP Army podcast. This is our channel. We talk about all things fantasy football, IDP, Dynasty, best ball. We cover it all fantasy football. Today, we've got a great show for you. We are going to be talking about Dynasty movers at wide receiver. We have some wide receivers that have definitely been seeing their value rise since the turn of the new year. We are in 2023. Dynasty fantasy football season is officially here. Have a handful of receivers that everyone likes. You know what I mean? So that's the situation is if everyone likes a player, their value is on the rise, or if everyone's against a player and their value is going down, how do we, as savvy, smart, winning fantasy managers, handle those situations? Do we buy? Do we sell? Do we keep? Do we trade? Do we cut? Do we see as a bearish asset? Is their value going to go down? Do we see them as a bullish asset? Do we think even though they are on the rise, they could keep going up? Does that mean this is still a good buy moment? So we're going to break into that, talk about it a little bit with a handful of players who hopefully you already have on a handful of your teams. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But before that, do me a huge favor. Subscribe to the channel. Go down into the comments. Leave us a comment. Tell me who you are looking to buy in Dynasty at the wide receiver position this offseason, who you're trying to unload, trying to flip. Would love to hear how everyone out there is sort of looking at their rosters now that we are a couple of weeks into January and how they're planning to attack the offseason, because it isn't really an offseason. It's part of Dynasty. There is no offseason, but how do you plan to play through the offseason? Feeling good? You chilling with your roster, or you making some moves? Leave a comment below. Would love to hear that. Now, before we jump into things today, it is January 16th, 2023. Just to let you know what the Dynasty market's all about. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I felt it would be disrespectful if I didn't reference that. And I do want to read a quote from Martin Luther King before we jump into the Dynasty fantasy stuff. He said here in his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech in Oslo, Norway, 1964, "I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits." I think the most important words are the first few. I have the audacity to believe. Starts here, okay? If you watch Ted Lasso, you know what I'm saying? You got to believe it. So thank you for everything you did for us, MLK. We honor you here on this show. All right, so what you're really here for is Dynasty wide receivers. Let's jump into it. This information is coming off of Keep Trade Cut. It's a crowdsourced website that takes Dynasty information from all over, individual people, individual leagues. They come in, they use their website, and then they crowdsource this data and create crowdsourced value-based Dynasty rankings. I like to use these because, unlike the rankings that an analyst would put out, which are a reflection of that person's opinion, these rankings that Keep Trade Cut generates are a reflection of what the true consensus Dynasty fantasy football player is thinking, how they are playing fantasy football. So let's go ahead and talk about the biggest risers at wide receiver. One of these guys is, and I say biggest, CeeDee Lamb's only up 3 spots. And you're like, okay, that's not a very big move, but he was already in the top 5. So I think this is a big move for him to jump over A.J. Brown and to jump over Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is down a little bit. Especially if you're at that in that top end already, to move 2 and 3 spots, I think that's very relevant. CeeDee Lamb, a player that more people seem to be coming around on, I think kind of realizing he's still going to go up, which is kind of crazy. You can see the market has reflected. His value has gone up over the past 6 months quite a bit, and just over the last 3. Let's look at the last month. It's been about a month and a half since, it's been about 4 or 5 weeks since the last video like this. Speaking of which, we do have other Dynasty value videos, and CeeDee Lamb was featured in that last one. Yeah. So, yeah, he's up from wide receiver 5 to wide receiver 3. Let's take a look at some of the stats he had this season. CeeDee Lamb, this is his 3rd season in the league. He's played at least 16 games in every season that he's been in the league. He hasn't always had the chance to play with Dak Prescott, though, which is rather unfortunate. But even with that being the case, this is his second 1,000-yard season, and as a rookie, he had 935 yards. This season, receptions, 107. You love to see that. 1,359 yards for CeeDee Lamb, 9 touchdowns. Pretty good. Pretty good. Yards of reception, 12.7. I'm not overly concerned with how deep the targets are for a guy like CeeDee Lamb because he's very good at yak. He's also very good at contested catches. He's just a very good all-around receiver. So I like that Dak is willing to target him short, medium, and long. One of the better all-around wide receivers in the league, 23 years old, and in his third year in the league, rather. So I think a lot of people are kind of realizing that we have a 23-year-old receiver who basically, with a small bit of imagination, has gone for over 3 1,000-yard seasons. Not technically. Again, as a rookie, 111 targets, 74 receptions, 935 yards. So CeeDee Lamb is on the move. If I had to keep, trade, or cut, I don't think I'm cutting him. Oh, well, obviously I'm not cutting him. I'm keeping him. I'm not going to trade away CeeDee Lamb right now, and I'm not going to trade for CeeDee Lamb right now. Hopefully, he's on a team that I have already. That's how I'm handling CeeDee Lamb going forward. I don't think that he's a bullish asset. He's not going to go past Jamar Chase. He's not going to go past Justin Jefferson. Even if one of those two guys had a cataclysmic type of injury, I don't see them falling that much just because of the value that we've placed on them. So let's get back to this list. Our next big riser, and we're just going to go down the list in order. Next biggest riser, Devonta Smith. I'll be honest, when Devonta Smith was coming out, I was skeptical of how he would perform in the NFL. I was skeptical of the Eagles team, coach, everything. And I will say I was wrong. I don't know if I was wrong to be skeptical. I would say I'm pleasantly surprised. Devonta Smith is working his way up the Dynasty community's ranks. He's moved his way up my rankings as well. This year, played 17 games, 136 targets, 95 receptions. And that was essentially as like the wide receiver 2 on his team, because I would assume we can all agree A.J. Brown is the wide receiver 1 for the Eagles. 12.6 yards of reception, 7 touchdowns. His numbers, honestly, are not that different than CeeDee Lamb's. I think that's why we've seen the market moving up on him. Now, here's the interesting thing about Devonta Smith and why, even though he has been going up in value, now wide receiver 12 in Dynasty, I don't know how much higher he can go. And I actually think the market will be a little bearish on him going forward. Why is that? Like I just said with CeeDee Lamb, he is 23 years old, basically just finished his third 1,000-yard season. Devonta Smith is already 24. He's a year older than CeeDee Lamb. Now, I'm not an ageist, but time horizon is relevant in Dynasty. So even if he maxes out and hits his absolute ceiling, he only has X number of days, weeks, years he can sustain that. And that's probably going to be less than a younger guy. That's just how math works. Wide receiver 12, I think the market is going to come down a little bit on Devonta Smith, especially in the offseason when we start getting the hype around certain players. Like a player like Michael Pittman, for instance. I would much rather have a Devonta Smith than a Michael Pittman. But every year we see these wildly overvalued players, wide receivers, based on potential rising in people's ranks. So Devonta Smith, I think he's going to get pushed down the Dynasty consensus rankings in the future. I'm not buying him right now. I am selling him right now or trading him away. And then I'm looking to come back later in the offseason when his value is probably closer to, I bet wouldn't surprise me if he's more in that wide receiver 18 to 20 range in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Be interesting to come back to this. Granted, now caveat that with, if the Eagles win the Super Bowl and Devonta Smith goes on some crazy run, you can just throw all that out the window. You probably knew that. Let's take a look at the Dynasty Index. Speaking of which, if you want to take a look at the Ultimate Dynasty Index, you can use this little code thingy right here, scan it, join the membership of our channel, and you can take a look at our rankings. We have Dynasty rankings, we have Dynasty rankings, Best Ball rankings, and obviously Ultimate IDP Index. But you can see my rankings. These were updated. I don't know. I think I updated them last a week or two ago. And I did creep old Devonta Smith right up here into the bottom of my tier 1. So I'm pretty close to consensus on how I value him. But I still don't think that I'm going to be. I think this is a good time to try to move him. That's my opinion. And then you can see I'm pretty close to consensus on CeeDee Lamb here. He is our Dynasty wide receiver 4. And the guys in this first tier, similar time horizons because of age. We're looking at all these guys are between 25 and 22, and all of them have a pretty good set of data in the NFL to back up why you should believe in them. Jalen Smith, no sweat on his rep. T. Higgins, no sweat on his rep. DK Metcalf might be the most undervalued dynasty wide receiver right now. 25 years old, but he just doesn't scare. I never feel bad playing DK Metcalf. Like, you never put him in and like, I don't know how I feel about it. Like, literally never. And that's such a good feeling to have a wide receiver. And there are a few guys even in this area. Like last year, you would have said that about Deebo Samuel, who's our top tier 2 guy. But now it's a little different, which is actually funny that I say that. A trade I made last offseason was Deebo Samuel for DK Metcalf. I'm pretty happy with it. I think the market reflects that was a smart trade. And speaking of which, let's go back to the third wide receiver who is on the rise the most in the top, 25 dynasty wide receivers, 30 dynasty wide receivers. And that is the player we just mentioned, Deebo Samuel. This is me. And this is why in dynasty, it's important you play the market. I drafted, and this is just a story. I drafted Deebo Samuel in dynasty stuff 2 years ago, like the 8th round, 9th round. This is when people didn't think he was going to be good. He was my wide receiver 3 or 4. That first year I had him on my team. He was incredible. I think he was the dynasty wide receiver or wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 or 3 that year. Running back snaps, tons of touchdowns. Looked amazing. And he is amazing. But his value had gone up so much from where I had acquired him, where I thought to myself, okay, how do I use this as leverage? DK Metcalf last year wasn't as amazing as people wanted in certain spots. With the Russell Wilson scare, people were worried. And I said, okay, DK Metcalf is a player that people have loved. There was a moment in time a couple of years ago where he was the dynasty wide receiver 1. And now we have a moment where there's a little bit of fear in the market. And we have a player like Deebo Samuel, who people used to be fearful of, who's at an all-time high in value. To me, that just makes sense. So I traded Deebo for DK. DK was incredible this year. Deebo was all right. I ended up having a major, that was a major positive move for me. But Deebo Samuel, now here down the stretch, on the rise again. Why? He's showing that he's still out there. He's still capable. People were worried when Jimmy went down. He wasn't being used as much. Ayuk actually performing well. George Kittle coming back out. But Deebo is still Deebo. People are realizing that. What I think they realized is they probably overvalued him a little bit last year, and that's fine. But that was a reflection of the fact that they undervalued him before that. DK Metcalf, like I said, just for the purposes of this video, I was able to lever up from a Deebo Samuel, who's 2 years older than DK Metcalf, has struggled with injuries. We don't know what his quarterback situation is. And I was able to get DK Metcalf, who we know it doesn't matter who his quarterback is. Okay. He's 25 years old. So I have 2 full years more time horizon with DK Metcalf. And he's a physical freak. And not just in the athletic freak type of way when we speak about Deebo Samuel. He is that. But he's also that with a lot more muscle and a lot more power. And he doesn't get hurt. He's basically the Derrick Henry of wide receivers. If you send him across the middle on a slant, the safety's going to have to make a business decision. And I don't know, it depends on the down and distance in the game, I imagine where he's going to go with that. So this is why I'm doing this video. This is why I'm going to do this series on the wide receivers, the running backs, all the dynasty positions, because the best way to build a team in dynasty is to be buying and selling, is to be trading. But it's so imperative that you look at the market, look at the player, and then figure out what the right move is. Because every player in dynasty fantasy football could be on a winning roster. How are you building your roster? How are you building your team? Are you making wise decisions? Are you trading players away when they are at peak value? Or are you buying players at peak value? If you're buying at peak value, if you buy the top, it's going to be a lot harder to win. Because by definition, if you buy the top, you can't keep going up in value. Now that player may help you win. I've saw quite a few win now trades go down in dynasty leagues last couple of weeks. There's a certain caveat or group of people that don't like win now dynasty trades, but I think they're very powerful. I saw a guy won my league, got players off of me. I traded him Myles Garrett and DJ Moore last 2 weeks of the semifinals and finals. Myles Garrett crushed the last couple of weeks of the season. And DJ Moore crushed last couple of weeks of the season. The very last week, he shit the bed. But before that, I mean, he was fucking God all of a sudden. I won't get into my DJ Moore situation in life. He's not on my team anymore. But here's the funny part, and I'm not even mad about this. So I traded my buddy, DJ Moore. He goes, he wins the title. He's already traded DJ Moore to somebody else. And he got more for him than what I gave him, essentially. I mean, if you really want to try to reduce it down. But that's in this moment. I like what I got back for DJ Moore. For my team, it's going to be powerful. DJ Moore just sitting on my bench. So play the market, be smart, find these moments where players have a higher value than they should or a lower value than they should, and hopefully you can win your leagues. So be sure that you all subscribe to this channel. We do have a lot of really good Dynasty content. We have great IDP content. We have great best ball content. It's what we do here. Okay, we love fantasy football. You don't come first place in the bash because you don't love fantasy football. I love playing fantasy football. I love talking about fantasy football. I love creating content around fantasy football. I love all of it. And I love you all. So thank you for being here. If you want to come back, which you should, subscribe, hit the bell. And if you want to support the channel, you can become a member at any given moment. All right, y'all. I will be back soon with another Dynasty Risers, Fallers video. I don't know what position I'll cover next. Probably running back or wide receiver, obviously for the offense. And then we are going to be doing our full recap breakdown on the top IDP players. I know you all have been waiting to hear that, waiting to see that. It's one of my favorite shows to do every year. Go back through, see the top 36 to 40 linebackers, defensive backs, and defensive line players. Research how they got there, putting together production profiles in the Ultimate IDP Index, getting all that information together, and then having a discussion with you all about how we are going to be attacking our defensive players, our IDP players in Dynasty this offseason, in our drafts, in our trades, and just in general. So thank you for being here with us. And like I said, have a happy Martin Luther King Day. All right, IDP Army, I'm out. Looking for the ultimate edge in fantasy football? The Ultimate Fantasy Index is finally here. The Ultimate Fantasy Index features the Ultimate Dynasty Index, the Ultimate IDP Index, and the Ultimate Best Ball Index. Each index features tiered rankings that are updated daily, which means you'll have a clear understanding of not only who the top players are, but also who the next best options are. More fun, more football, more fantasy for the culture. Join the IDP Army and start winning your leagues today.